What is going on, Chart Football Fantasy family? Is your resident Swami of Konami, Rich Hribar, and we are here in the throes of August, approaching the season. There's a reminder, go to sharpfootballanalysis.com. You can check out the Sharp Football Fantasy Draft Kit that myself and Raymond Summerlin have been pouring sweat over for months this entire offseason. You can check out the 2024 football preview book from Warren Sharp. You can use promo code GETSHARP, all one word, for 50% off either of those if you want to get into those in the 11th hour. With the housekeeping out of the way, let me bring in our guest today. Usually when you hear us, it's the roles are reversed. Usually I'm on his show and he's asking me questions. We're podcasting for 3.5 hours. I promised to him we will not do the 3.5 hour version of this podcast, but it's Matt Kelley from Player Profiler. Matt, what's going on, brother?
Dude, welcome. I feel so good. This is a great setup you have. Look at this, professionally produced. I feel like, dude, this looks great. So whoever is producing this thing behind the scenes is doing a great job. This is a professional setup you have. It feels great to be a guest. I've already received the show sheet from you. I kind of know the questions we're going to get into. I did my research.
Yeah, I mean, what's it like where, you don't have to listen to me talk for, and just ramble on, how's it going to be here?
Well, I don't think it's going to be much different because basically when I ask you questions on my show, it's because I also have a take.
Gotcha.
So now I know, and then basically your questions are a little more open-ended, but I'm like, well, I have takes and I'm going to go ahead and shoehorn them right into this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how I like.
You and I have drafted together already. So you and I have already been in some drafts,
right?
The Kings Classic in Canton. So you and I have squared off in multiple drafts already. So we can actually talk about real, actual scenarios that fantasy gamers will find themselves in this weekend and next weekend. So it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And how was your trip to Canton? Are you coming back to Canton?
Oh yeah, I love it. Well, Canton is interesting because it's the first place that I've gone where it's not just business folk talking about, oh, hey, the regulations have changed over here, and this is how you do compliance over there. This is a little bit different in that, we're just talking football here. Like these are real. There's a lot of regular people from Ohio and Pennsylvania and Michigan and Indiana that come in and they're like, hey, I have like 3 leagues. Let's talk ball. And that's what I was doing. I mean, guys like Ian Harditz. I mean, so many guys that I have been following or been interacting in a virtual medium for many years, digital friends that I've had that actually to meet them, to be like, oh my God, dude, you're jacked. You know what I mean? Like, holy, look at you. You're this guy. You're that guy. So I was feeling really, it was a treat, man.
Yeah, one of the things I always tell people when they go to these events is you don't realize because we see each other always in like these little boxes, right? We see each other from the shoulder up. Everyone's a lot taller than you think they are when you see them in person.
Yeah, you're like a college.
Well, I was a wide receiver.
You're pretty much a college level wide receiver. I mean, you did win. I mean, think about it. I mean, you won the world flag football championship as the starting X receiver.
Well, we were in nationals. But it was the old man. Last championship came in the old man league, 35 and older. So put an
35,
on it.
Dude. That's not an old man. Do you realize how good 36-year-olds could look?
Well,
you were going up against. I'm sure you were going up again,st some guys.
There were some people we needed to see some IDs on for sure. I needed to check some birth certificates.
Well, that's right. That's right. You were probably going up against some guys with like 6-pack abs, and you were like, "Listen, man, I don't necessarily have what you have, but I have other things. I have other grit, and I have other experience, and I'm going to grab your wrist over here, and I'm going to get leverage over there, and I'm going to own you." And you guys won. It was amazing.
So we're gonna jump into some stuff here too that we talked about some draft scenarios. But as we were coming on, I don't know if you've even seen this coming on. There was a trade.
Oh,
an actual NFL trade happened. Jahan Dotson got traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. We can try to pick this apart. You can let me know if you see any hope for Jahan Dotson as the Philadelphia wide receiver 3, but this probably more what it does for like the Commanders. And your player profiler, dynasty background. So we've got guys that maybe were on the tail end of rosters, like say Olamide Zaccheaus. We got Luke McCaffrey, who was like a 3rd, 4th round rookie draft pick. Is anyone still holding on to Diami Brown? Like these are guys we know Cliff Kingsbury wants to play a lot of 11 personnel and 4 wide receivers. Like, is there any hope for some of these guys? They're just going to be on the field now.
they're going to be on the field. They're not going to be getting a lot of targets. Is the thing. Like, this is cool for Luke McCaffrey. They've clearly seen enough from Luke McCaffrey. They can make this deal. It's also just weird for Dotson. I expected more. This was a guy that had like a Devontae Smith level skill set coming out of Penn State. He was an early producer. He fit the mold of what the new NFL wide receivers that are producing huge numbers, what they look like. And so I'm surprised. I mean, I wasn't the most bullish on him. There were some, like there's a whole Dotson hive. I wasn't Dotson hive level, but I respected the hell out of this guy's ability coming out of Penn State. And for him to just get flushed, like it's over. Like if you get punted at this point on a team that has no number 2 wide receiver,
Right.
it's not good. It's not good. So basically he's done. You know, he's now on the I have a rookie card here. He's on the Travis Fulgham track now. I bought Travis Fulgham rookie cards ironically. You guys remember that, right? Remember this? So, I mean, this is a first rounder on the Travis Fulgham track. So that's super sad. And most of the other wide receivers on Washington, we're going to hear from them in spurts. We're going to hear from them for spike weeks. It's great for Luke McCaffrey. In fact, the funny thing is I tweeted about Luke McCaffrey last night. I'm not even a big tweeter. And I remember tweeting about Luke McCaffrey because on this FastDraft platform that we have, there's an all rookie game. And actually, one of the cool stacks you can do in the all rookie game has been Jaden Daniels and Luke McCaffrey. And I've seen some people doing that. And now there's the new stacks that I'm seeing with these Atlanta Falcon stacks, the super clever Michael Penix with Casey Washington.
Oh wow, getting deep in the
hey, we run deep. We're hardcore in Dynasty. So yes, Luke McCaffrey for Dynasty, absolutely. De'Ami Brown more for seasonal leagues, more as like a streaming pickup potentially. But how I look at it is the same reason why I wasn't bullish on Alec Pierce, players like this. If you have a mobile first quarterback, they're going to be looking at their primary option at the wide receiver position. And then a lot of times they're going to default down to running back, tight end. And the wide receiver 2 in that offense often gets caught up in the wash and has actually very few usable weeks with those kinds of offenses. That's why even Josh Downs, Adonai Mitchell couldn't get there with them. It's like, what's the math on how these guys actually are startable in a managed league? So lesson as always in those kinds of teams with mobile first quarterbacks, stay away from the wide receiver 2s and 3s. You don't even want to get caught in those situations, right? It's like, you don't want to call the flop in those situations and see cards, because pretty much you're only going to be disappointed, right? You put that guy on your team, and then now what are you going to do? You're going to have to figure out when to start Luke McCaffrey. Good luck, right? You don't want those problems, man. So now McCaffrey becomes an interesting guy for best ball and for dynasty stashing, but I'm always like, hey, let's make sure that we take 5-10 of these teams in the NFL. And in managed leagues, do not ever draft anything other than the primary option. Don't do it. That's my advice. So there's certain formats where you can get bullish on some of these auxiliary weapons in Washington, but otherwise it's like, hey man, Terry McLaurin to the moon, baby.
Yeah, it's like you said, Dotson, especially. Dotson was a guy I literally drafted in rookie drafts just based on kind of capital, right? Like he was going like 108, 19, 110. It's like, this dude went like with basically the same draft capital as Treylon Burks, who was going like 101 that year, 101, 102. And so
it was a pick ahead of Burks.
Yeah, he was one pick ahead.
Yeah.
And I just defaulted into saying I'll bet on the capital. And for rookie year, it was like, it was one of those things where like you looked right and wrong at the same time, because like he flashed, but like he got there all on touchdown production. The underlying peripherals for Jahan Dotson's rookie season were not good. He just scored touchdowns.
But he looked good.
Yeah, he did. But
there were GIFs on Twitter of him looking explosive.
It wasn't Treylon Burks-esque.
And I tried to tell people, I was like, do not fall for the banana in the tailpipe. Do not fall for these splash plays and these touchdowns. You have to zoom out. This is why we built PlayerProfiler.com, because I was so often fooled by this. I was fooled by,
Mhm.
hey, I remember seeing that guy on the Red Zone channel. Hey, I remember seeing this. I remember seeing this on social media. But then you actually look back and like his targets per route run was terrible. His yards per route run was awful. You know, some of these advanced stats, like his separation wasn't there. His yak per target was not, it was like, oh, he's actually ranked outside the top 50 in all these categories. Man, my eyes must have been deceiving me. Yes, they were.
They do
Because there
that.
were all these other reps where he did nothing.
They do that, man. You always remember the plays that stand out. You don't remember the 35 other hollow pass routes he ran, and that's what we had last year.
And
Where
it's
just
just an easy
everything's
back of the napkin exercise to run,
Yep.
where if you're top of the league in target and end zone target, but also mostly touchdown rate, then you're, especially if you're a rookie or a second year player, you're getting faded into the next season.
And
You know,
we've seen that even before with Jordan Addison a little bit, who doesn't have like the complete overlap to Dotson's rookie year, but like there is a lot of overlap to how Jordan Addison got there last year for fantasy. And gamers probably 5-6 years ago, a guy coming off of Jordan Addison's rookie season, maybe the quarterback stuff was priced in. If Kirk Cousins is retained there, maybe we see him go higher. But we would typically see like a wide receiver coming off of a 10 touchdown season or like be kind of with some helium in him. And
oh yeah.
Addison didn't even have that before the arrest, before the DUI. As
Well, yeah, he's
gamers are
also
just
got the
better
knucklehead
now.
factor going on. So
Yeah, gamers is
it's
better.
for him, it's like he's been a giant stay away for me because I'm like, you got the touchdown rate, red flag. So you had touchdown regression plus the double knucklehead, you know, multiple incidents with the police. So this is not good. And it's easy because one of the dichotomy questions I always ask on my podcast, hey, JSN or Addison? And it's like, to me, it's like JSN and a smash. And now we have the Lockett, slow roll through preseason
Right.
with the injury. So now it's a little bit easier to be bullish on JSN. But I mean, it's been JSZN all year. And
JS.
and 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 for in many drafts, you saw Addison go earlier, and it's like, nah, 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 nah. In
Mhm.
fact, the only time I've ever drafted Addison is we got him by accident in this auction you and I were in. But Theo and I were drafting a team, and Addison was at like $7, and we were just bidding to bid, and it closed it out, and
And
we
everyone
got
just
him.
dropped. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, that's the scenario. Like,
That's
that's why you never say no. You never cross a guy off completely, because I'm like, oh, well, that's a value play. We'll take him there. I mean, if he's only $7, then sure. I think, yeah, JSN went for, actually quite a bit more than that. So it was okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. You look at Commanders, like remaining guys on their roster. They've got guys like Byron Pringle, Martavis Bryant, and Jamison Crowder, and it's like the major league meme where like they're guys was like, this guy's dead. They're like, we'll cross them off the list. And it's like the group of dudes that they've got now like left over in this offense. Maybe we'll see like Ben Sinnott play some more. But you're right. Like from a managed stance, you're just never gonna get the ancillary like pieces right. You just in best ball hope to soak some of it up.
Yep.
But yeah, so some loose news here to open the show. Obviously it's not earth moving. It's not a Brandon Ayuk trade, right? Like it's nothing that's really going to alter the way fantasy like ADP has been going to this point so far, outside of just no one is going to take Dotson now. So let's jump into some of this stuff right now that we're going to get into. And we're kind of good. I kind of want to use it just to kind of pick your brain and like some just like top down, draft thoughts. We're approaching like these final 2 weeks of summer where it's prime draft season. And I'm not talking underdog. I'm not talking fast draft. Everywhere we're talking like where people are getting to see people in person and they're drafting the leagues that they care about. Like they want to brag rights. They're not even looking for like the payday, right? Some are. You have the overlap, but like, you want to beat your friends, like the camaraderie angle. Like everyone's getting prepped for these main drafts.
I love it.
So
these are the best emails I get. Podfather@rotorwonderworld.com. People just email me because I still do email. I'm still an emailer. My default is to give my email, not my Twitter X handle, which is so boomer. I'm a pretty center of the Venn diagram boomer at this point. But I love these emails when people talk about what they're doing in their managed leagues against their buddies, against their family. Unbelievable. I love it. Love the stories. Someone I was talking to yesterday, 2 days ago, It's actually Justin Boone from The Score. He's in a managed league with his buddies from high school. Great dude, super smart, always top 5 on Fantasy Pros. And he had Gilbert Godfrey roast all the people in his league, because what they would do is they would gang up on him every year and refuse to trade with him and conspire against him. And always he would finish second. He finally won, and he had Gilbert, get in there and be like, Jimmy doesn't know squat. You know what I mean? And it's like, you got to love that, so that this is what we live for. Please, for the love of God, stay in these leagues with your buddies. Don't let it go. Tell whoever wants you to do something on Sunday to pound sand and go draft.
Yep, absolutely. So let's kind of move into just like we're going to kind of work through positions, but I think just we'll have some natural, things come up through the conversation that we're having from other positions too, as it, because it's not just gonna be like, Matt, what do you think about this player? We're not going to do that. So let's kind of start with quarterback in general and like some top down thoughts. Let's just assume and you can spin this if you want to get to like super flex and into QB stuff too, but QB1 overall, like how early is too early for you? Like what's the breaking point where you say like, screw it, I'm going to take Josh Allen or whoever you have as QB1.
Do you remember Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts at the 1-2 turn a year ago?
In early leagues, remember they always will go like the general public leagues. They go a lot.
Well, last year was the peak. Last year was the peak renaissance of quarterback, and then they flattened out, and then it was okay. I guess they're back in the 3rd round again. Okay, good. And now we have Josh Allen, who has very few weapons, and the weapons are getting injured. The thing is, though, you have to keep him there. You can't push Josh Allen down because their defense is getting worse. So what's going to happen is this is what you got to look out for, and this is why we do the analysis. This is why you tune in to Sharp Football. This is what Rich will tell you. He'll be like, "Yes, I get it. There's no Diggs, but guess what? The pass volume is going to go up. The pace of play is going to go up. Look at these pieces on defense they've lost." Okay, you talk to Bills fans, they're apoplectic about the situation. But that's actually a reason to be drafting Josh Allen more, because he is going to have to it is going to be Josh Allen YOLO mode this year. And so if you were drafting him in the 2nd round last year, actually you were hoping to get this year's production last year when you were taking him so high. So it's counterintuitive, but we just are at Player Profiler, and I was talking about me and Theo and I drafting together at the Kings Classic. We were always debating in these rounds, is this a Josh Allen? Are we ready to push the button on Josh Allen? And the name Jalen Hurts never came up. I actually nominated Jalen Hurts first to get him out of the way and set the bar high on quarterback pricing just to get him out of the auction. Right, because I was like, get him out of there. So
he's got Jahan Dotson now.
Oh, well, that changes everything. But yeah, love Josh Allen. He would be the one guy. He would be the one guy if you want. I still don't do it. Okay, I like it, and like I said, I'm always trying to find rationalizations to get Josh Allen because I know what we're in store for is going to be fireworks. They're just gonna have him drop back and improvise the whole season, which is exactly what you want. But there's a lot of great options later, and I just can't do it. I can't do it. It's interesting because Jaden Daniels is in a similar situation, except he still has his Stephon Diggs in Terry McLaurin. They're hollowing out his pass catching core. He's essentially got like whatever the equivalent of Curtis Samuel is, and De'Ami Brown, whatever it is, right? And he's just going to be rolling out, checking for McLaurin or running. And, Josh Allen's going to be rolling out, checking for Dalton Kincaid, checking for Shakir, and running. So I've been all in on Jaden Daniels, and it's disappointing. This happens all the time where we're just penciling a guy into our team, and a lot of these expert drafts at the FSGA, and so I've been able to get a lot of Daniels. But now that all these preseason performances are coming out, and it's starting to dawn on people how good he's going to be, perhaps Cam Newton rookie year level production, it's like, okay, we're not going to get him anymore. But I would stay at cost, even right now, even at this moment in the stock market, I would still rather have Daniels than Allen. And then there's a conversation about other guys. There's 12 or more quarterbacks you're going to be very comfortable with. So there's still no issues whatsoever with being the last person to draft a quarterback in your league. Caleb Williams is another one.
Yep.
Right. So we're getting a lot of information from Hard Knocks in the preseason, and it's all great. It's really good. He's rolling out, and when his weapons aren't there, he's running it in, and we get to see it, and we get to see the behind the scenes. And this guy's the real deal. It looks like Aaron Rodgers out there. Someone else says he looks like Patrick Mahomes. It's like, well, that's all really good. I don't think anyone was saying any of this about, Bryce Young during the preseason last year. Like, who's gonna? I'm not drafting CJ Stroud this year. Hell no. I mean, the prices on these Houston Texans are also inflated. You get no stack equity with him because all these options besides Tank Dell are overinflated. It doesn't even make sense. If you had a spreadsheet, you can't even justify these Houston Texans ADPs at all. So just go for this year's CJ Stroud. I'm not drafting for 2023. I'm drafting for 2024. That's Jaden Daniels. That's Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I love those. Those are like my two like firewall guys in the back of drafts, and those guys I think in a lot of general population home leagues will go lower than kind of where even their ADP sits now, and they've gotten a little. Daniels, I remember pre-draft was like a gift because there was like he was always probably going to go top 2, top 3 at worst. And I remember pre-draft, he was like sitting like QB 16, and I'm like, this guy has what you want for fantasy. And then he lands with Cliff, and we give Cliff a lot of grief, for his head coaching tenure in Arizona. But like we know they're just going to run a lot of plays.
Well, that's what you want.
Exactly.
As a head coach, he was, he reached that Peter principle, right? It's Peter Kingsbury. It's fine, right?
Yep.
He's not a head coach. But as an offensive coordinator, what do we care about? Pace of play, pace of play, pace of play. That was the whole Kellen Moore argument. Kellen Moore loves to call plays fast until he doesn't. Well, for now, until he proves us wrong, he's a fast play caller. So let's go.
Yeah, so you kind of hinted on like Jaden Daniels, Caleb, those are the guys like you're kind of targeting at cost. You're avoiding Stroud, and like Stroud is just in that kind of unfortunate strike zone. I think that Stroud, the real life player, is going to have an excellent football season. For fantasy football, it's just tough. Like he has to flirt with 40 passing touchdowns at that draft capital to kind of pay off that price. And if he throws 28 touchdowns, like he opens the door to be arbitraged by whoever this year's Baker Mayfield is or whoever this year's Jared Goff is. That's just the way fantasy football is played. It's the way it's
seen how many movies have we seen, Rich?
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of movies with the second year quarterback and it's
the pocket passer.
This isn't even like super analytics heavy analysis. This is just life that we know as football fans.
Yeah, and Stroud could have a great season. The Texans could have a really great season. And if you're a fan of the Texans, all these things can be still true, and CJ Stroud still be like kind of a not great fantasy pick at his ADP. So that all exists because, like I said, he's just those guys that are pass reliant. They just have to run so pure in terms of passing performance that it's hard to bet on that, right? Like there's gonna be a lot of times over Joe Burrow's career where he does flirt with 40 passing touchdowns. There'll be multiple seasons, but there's probably going to be 7 to 8 seasons where he throws like 25 touchdowns and then he's not a good fantasy pick, right? Like it's just the way fantasy ball scored. I don't make the rules. That's why guys like Jaden Daniels are hiring. This is why Anthony Richardson has the ADP that he has, even though we have not seen any sample of Anthony Richardson playing actual football that he actually can play quarterback. Like actually play like the nuts and bolts of the position. But the fact that he is such a good runner and has so much potential touchdown equity, like he averaged more points per dropback than Josh Allen did last year and was everything we thought we were worried about coming out of college as a passer. So yeah, that's just the way the game is played. Unfortunate. So like we'll move on from the quarterback stuff.
No, I have one other guy.
Yeah,
one other guy, format specific. If it's best ball and I care very much about stacking, by far and away, and I think, and it's interesting because he also was, I think he was on the Best Ball Mania winning roster last year, was Jordan Love. Mm-hmm. And if you're looking to max out stack equity, Jordan Love is the gift. You're not going to find anything. I mean, in the next decade, I don't think you're going to find all these wide receiver ADPs scattered throughout like the universe.
Well, for players that we think are good too, like sometimes you'll run into a situation.
Amazing what you can do backdoor stacking Jordan Love.
Because most people, even though they they don't know what to do with the Packers wide receiver room based on, ADP. Most people believe that at least 3 of those 4 guys are good, and you can still find Romeo Doubs fans too.
And I like Bo Melton.
Yeah, and people do. There's a Bo Melton
There's
contingency
a
out
Bo
there as
Melton
well.
hive. I love Luke Musgrave and the mustache. There's so, oh my God. Like it's like supermarket sweep with Jordan Love. And it's not like, even if you have Reed, that's the obvious next move is to draft Jordan Love at, maybe 5 or 6 slots ahead of ADP, lock him in, and then you can double, triple stack, and then you're getting incredible correlation for the dollar in best ball. You're not going to find this. I mean, this is going to be a once every few years phenomenon where we get this from a quarterback, this kind of stacking options, just because a target tree that's that ambiguous with that much talent, it's so rare. I mean, look at the on the other end of the spectrum is the Houston Texans, where it's like the whole team is Nvidia stock.
Yeah.
It's like,
And it's a team that probably is gonna run the football more than anyone wants them to, like, on the
yes,
surface. Like,
you're
Bobby
just setting
Slowick.
yourself up
Yeah,
for
Bobby Slowick has
a
got, the
beating.
Shanahan, Mike McDaniel ties. Like, they are going to use a fullback too. Like, Anthony Beck's gonna play snaps, or is it Andrew Beck? I forget. It's one of the Becks. He ran that kickoff back last year. But he's gonna play snaps.
Just draft Packers, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Packers great schedule too,
Oh,
especially coming out of the start of the season too.
oh,
You front half until their bye, it looks really good. They put plenty of shootout potential for the Packers as well.
yeah. And if you get some spike weeks out of Christian Watson in your managed league, trade him.
Yeah, because he's a managed dude. Like, I've been in on Watson in best ball leagues, but for managed leagues, like, he's a guy, like, will probably be a head scratcher for you week to week.
Yeah.
He'll have the 130-yard game on the 4 receptions when you bench him, and then he
I'm
comes
fine.
back.
Like he's at the outer bounds of where I draft wide receivers and manage leagues. Pretty much
Mhm.
once the Christian Watsons and the Khalil Shakirs, the guys that are on these offenses where it's ambiguous and they could really jump up and have some early season spike weeks. I want those guys, and then I'm out. Because
Yeah, and by
those guys
then,
have
we're
real
filled.
trade equity as soon as the season starts.
Well, let's spin that into this, because how we're drafting teams this year, and we'll fold it into the running back. So running back ADP, we've seen this going, an ongoing trend for multiple reasons. It's not just zero RB, anchor RB. It's because the league in general, like, we have a finite number of resources of elite bell cow running backs from the old school fantasy football sense, guys that actually provide elite positional leverage. Maybe that starts to change, if Bijan and Breece get there this year, and then, this next draft class looks good on paper to do an influx of running back talent. So maybe we'll see some things start to counteract there. But right now, wide receivers are kind of ruling the roost in ADP. We still know that what kind of running backs that people want. That's why Bijan and Breece Hall are still in the first round. So let's talk about how you're playing that, the finite resource game. How high are you drafting Bijan, Breece Hall, assuming McCaffrey's 101? If you have one of those guys 101, please share. But, like, if you've got 102, are you taking Bijan, Breece because you understand the leverage that those guys could provide if they hit? Or are you feeling like you don't want to get caught up into the wake, and then, like, in round 2, you're looking down the gun barrel and you're like, all right, I've got to take, whatever wide receiver 16, right? With my wide receiver 1 now. So how are you handling that top tier versus the wide receivers?
You got to work backwards. First of all, you got to work backwards and ask yourself, okay, does someone win a championship with an elite RB2? When was the last time that happened in my league? Oh,
Never.
it
Very
didn't
rarely.
happen? Oh, it didn't. Oh, okay. And so the person that's winning your league has like CJ Anderson and players like that every year in their RB2 spot. Why do you think that is? Okay, because if you hit on a running back, then you need to be able to have a position to put him in. Okay. So you're assuming that you're smart. You're tuned into sharp football, for Christ's sake. You're damn sharp if you're doing that and you're listening to Rich. Then you're going to hit on a running back. So no going in, I'm going to hit on a running back. Okay. So that would be like the beauty of fantasy football. It's a lot easier than poker because we know we're going to hit on a running back on the turn of the river. We know it. right? So just set yourself up to win. And that means not overspending on running back early, number one, and then trying to play it so that you can optimize your wide receiver core. As soon as it gets, in past pick 50, it gets so thin at wide receiver where you're really not sure. You're like, man, what's Christian Watson? You might as well draft Christian Watson over anyone else outside the top 50 because who the fuck knows, right? You could go with Deontay Johnson, and that's great. He's going to get a lot of targets, but he could have so could Khalil Shakir could have a Deontay Johnson season. Who knows, right? So yes, I love targets, but if they're close to the line of scrimmage, then the upside isn't there. So if you can find wide receivers that are getting the 150 targets, but also efficiently down the field, that is so valuable and very much worth the early season capital, the early ADP in those picks. So when you back it out, most of these leagues now, you're going to start at least 3 receivers, if not 4 or 5. Okay. Most of these leagues that I've seen have converted to 3 wide receiver starting lineups. You got to fill it out, work your way through it. Do you really want to you don't want to be in that position to decide which guy that's going to go for 12 or 0 am I going to put in my wide receiver 3 position. Don't put yourself in that position. Okay. And give yourself out so that you can hit on a running back 2 in week 3 or 4. And that means hero RB or 0 RB. That's what you're down to. So as much as I believe that Saquon and Jonathan Taylor are really interesting picks at the 12-13 turn. I mean, we are in a historic year that you could get former 101 picks in fantasy football.
Yep.
That are now in their dream scenario situations where their situation has just got a Mario Mushroom upgrade across the board with the exception of maybe goal line carries. Okay. Everything else for Saquon and JT is optimized to max out their efficiency, their production. Every linebacker now has to have an eye on Hurts, an eye on Richardson, but then also pay attention to Jonathan Taylor, also pay attention to Saquon Barkley. Any casual football fan is like, you fantasy gamers drive me nuts. You guys drive me crazy. You guys are telling me to draft this guy at the 101 last year over Christian McCaffrey, and now I can get Jonathan Taylor in the middle of the second round. F you. F you. I'm not listening to your podcast anymore. F you. I'm not doing it. It doesn't make sense. And I love that you started the question with that. It was a little subtle. It was a subtle preface. And as a podcast host myself, I appreciate the subtle preface of proper bell cows, right? There was a little bit of an undercurrent
Yep.
to make sure that, hey, we're not talking HN here. Okay. We're not even talking Gibbs. Gibbs is not probably going to lead his team in carries. So you can't call a guy that's number 2 on his team in carries a bell cow. And there's risk to a guy like guy like Gibbs. Gibbs a little bit more of a best ball option than a managed league option. But there's going to be weeks where Gibbs just doesn't deliver, where a guy like Barkley, a guy like Taylor, I prefer in that situation. And you're going to call me old school. You call me a boomer, but that's fine. But as attracted as I am to JT and Saquon, from a team building standpoint, you cannot double tap running back at the end of the first round. You can't do it. If you're going to go Saquon, you got to get AJ Brown. You got to get Garrett Wilson. And I actually think Garrett Wilson, because he's a projection, Puka Nacua is a projection, right? There's a bunch of guys that are considered projections. Drake London's a projection, right? We've never seen Garrett Wilson score 13 fantasy points a game for a season. No one's ever seen it. But we think he's going to this year, of course. In fact, this is what we're here for. We're here for, okay, there's going to be more shootouts in the AFC East this year. The quarterback play, maybe it's going to maybe the pace of play is not going to be there, but it's going to be much more accurate. We're not afraid of Mike Williams. We're not afraid of Tyler Conklin. Let's go with Garrett Wilson. I actually think there's less risk with Garrett Wilson. I'm actually more comfortable pushing the button on Garrett Wilson at the 1-2 turn than I am Breece Hall in the middle of the first, because everything we're hearing about Braylon Allen is he's a stud, right? This guy's a stud. This was an incredible value. Can't believe how he fell. We're trying to work him into the passing game. At some point, you can't just close your eyes and keep going back and looking at the efficiency of Breece Hall in that one game with 37 carries last year and just want it to happen, right? This wish casting that they're going to put him in a bell cow role. I haven't seen it other than one game in my life. And again, this is a boomer perspective, but I would rather draft Bijan in the middle of the first than Breece Hall. And I don't have much Breece Hall. I don't see any reason why you can't just pivot off of Breece Hall, pivot off of, a Devon Achane and just say, listen, I don't need to hit a home run. With my hero RB, I don't need to accept any of this risk. I don't need to project. With Bijan Robinson, this offense is certainly going to be better than what we're seeing in New York, right? So there's a lot of the ancillary situational advantage goes to Bijan if you just have that dichotomy between Bijan versus Breece Hall. And there's also, if you go back, to how they were evaluated as prospects, one was a top 10 pick, one was a second round pick. And there are, and I know this drives fantasy gamers crazy, there are plenty of people in front offices around the league that they believe Breece Hall to be a satellite back. They don't even think, and I've talked to these people.
I mean, I don't believe that. So.
I don't. If it were me, I'd give him 90% opportunity share. But I'm not these people. And they go and they tip their hand and they tell you what they're thinking when they make these picks, right? When they pick a Braylon Allen. So I am going to be a little more cautious and read into some of these situations when I'm making a decision between a Breece Hall and a Bijan Robinson. But ultimately, based on the build, it's even difficult to justify even Bijan there when I can get Amon-Ra St. Brown. They have the same ADP, and you're not going to get anything close to that. You're not going to get anything close to that. What Amon-Ra will give you in a position where you, in a lot of these leagues, you start more wide receivers than running backs. What he's going to give you is going to be more. The difference between Amon-Ra and whatever, fourth, fifth round wide receiver, that differential is going to be very similar to Bijan versus a guy like a Kenneth Walker or a Rachaad White. So I have no problem whatsoever starting three receivers and then soaking up a Rachaad White or a Kenneth Walker, because I do believe that both of those guys are going to catch more passes this year. Walker for sure, based on what we're hearing, and I believe it. They're playing Zach Charbonnet in preseason. Walker's with a T-shirt. You love to see it. And Rachaad White was awesome last year in a situation where he had one of the most injury-ravaged offensive lines. Everything is going to be better. They got total continuity where all they did was the changes they made in Tampa were we're going to upgrade the offensive line. So, hey, for 2 seasons in a row, Rachaad White is a super discount hero RB, and I'll take it.
Yeah, and of course, format and stuff is going to matter. If you're in, full PPR, I think you and I play in a lot of full PPR where you said that it's increased how many wide receivers you have to start. If there's extra flexes, then that pushes you to want more wide receivers. ESPN is still, it's full PPR, but they start 2 wide receivers. FFPC is another full PPR, start 2 wide receivers. If there are 2 flexes, which inherently you still want to push wide receivers to those flex spots. And
that's a great point. If there are 2 flexes and it's full PPR, just assume one of those positions is a third receiver.
Correct. So, I mean, if you're in like these half-point PPR leagues and like you only have to start 2, like it does move some chairs around a little bit, especially you look at last year. Like Taylor and Saquon from a points per game perspective and half-point PPR last year scored more points than Puka Nacua. James Conner scored more points in half-point PPR than Mike Evans, right?
That's a great point. Yeah, if we're talking half PPR, then I'm smashing Bijan there every time.
So like, always know your format. I mean, I think we're talking top down. Let's kind of bridge something what you said, though, because you talked about Garrett Wilson. Let's say, so like picks 10 through 12 this year in a traditional league. Let's assume full PPR just for the sake of this conversation.
Right.
Picks 10 through 12, the top tier wide receivers gone. Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall gone.
Right.
Now, what are we doing? Are you taking Taylor there? Are you looking to split the baby? Because I want to compare where your brain is with Taylor and Barkley versus like that secondary tier wide receivers where that projections there. I'm not counting Garrett Wilson. He goes because he regularly goes. It's the Drake Londons, the Olaves, the Marvin Harrisons, that next group of wide receivers. Are you comfortable going with two of those guys, like two projection wide receivers? Or are you looking to say, like, I'll take Taylor and then I'll take the London projection, or I'll take the Olave projection, so I have some insulation?
I mean, this is the hardest question you ever asked. I mean, this
It
is
is.
so hard.
Because
You're
I mean,
saying
10 through 12
you're
is
saying I
rough.
can't draft Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, he's gone.
Yeah, okay. I can't
Top
draft
10,
Garrett Wilson.
top 10 usually gone.
Yeah, I can't
top
draft
9.
AJ Brown. Right. So
Yep, gone.
now I'm into this very difficult world where I think there's a drop. That's a tear break to me. From
And a
London
lot of
down to
people are faced with
Harrison.
this, though. I remember we did a draft 2 weeks ago. I had pick 14 in a 14-team PPR.
Well, you're not drafting Nakua, okay, based on the injury. You're not doing that. And man, you know, my colleague Billy Muzio, you know, up recently, he was like, if Brandon Ayuk is traded, then you could take Deebo Samuel that high. There's a lot of risk with Marvin Harrison, man. Marvin Harrison did not test his athleticism. Marvin Harrison could be less athletic, slower than anyone realizes. The rapport in camp has largely been between Murray and Wilson and Murray and Dortch. So there's been just a weird phenomenon there. I gotta say, oh man, I would just go with London because his metrics, especially as a rookie, were that good. I would hate it though. I would hate it. I would
I mean, people
so
are
much
picking 12
rather
this year.
go Saquon and Jonathan Taylor, and in half PPR, I absolutely would. See, that's the thing. Half PPR, you're going to gift me Bijan, I'm taking him, right? All day. Right? Half PPR, maybe I could get that figured out. But that tier break is so devastating.
It is.
And the risk for Harrison, we haven't seen him. We don't know how good he is. And he was so cagey throughout the process. And it just a bullshit artist. Just like, hey, and every interview question, what did he say? I'm focused on the 2024 season. What? I mean, excuse me? Like, no questions? We can't ask you. You won't test. You won't even get on a scale. Like, this is just a total black box other than your production. Like, that's a lot to ask at the beginning of the second round in a fantasy draft, man.
Also smart on Marvin Harrison's part.
And Gene, very smart. Great. I mean, there's a couple guys out there that I think have amazing. No one's handled the business side of football better than Kirk Cousins, but Marvin Harrison's, right there. He's like he's already on track to be the Kirk Cousins of wide receivers in terms of managing the process. So I would go with Drake London just because the upgrade of the offense in Atlanta is so delicious in so many ways that everything is getting better. The offenses they're gonna face they're good enough to generate some shootouts. The reason I love Bijan so much, though, is I think there's going to be some blowouts, and that's even why you're going to get some Tyler Algier games because of the blowouts against the Saints, teams like that disappoint. So I would go London there because you're forcing me, and then I would go JT.
With one of the running backs.
Yeah, I gotta go JT there, but then also Derrick Henry too. Right. The other
at
thing
the 1-2 turn, you're going to
no. I'm just saying in terms of running backs, I'm in consideration. Right. Especially in half PPR, I'm considering Henry over Gibbs. Oh yeah.
Oh, in half PPR, yeah. I mean, there's.
Oh yeah, but then in PPR, I think it's close, and I think that if there were bigger stakes, the thing is like as the stakes go up in some of these leagues, I'm a little less likely to take risk, and it's just a 12-team league. I'm not, there's a time and a place for players like Gibbs when I'm going in a tournament setting. But if I'm just trying to beat 11 other guys, it's like I said, what is the guy on the bar stool who just watches the NFL? What is he going to say? He's going to say Derrick Henry just landed in the plum situation we've always dreamed of for him. What the hell are you doing not drafting him? Overthinking fantasy guy. Same thing with Barkley. Same thing with Jonathan Taylor. So I like all three of those guys.
I like that you brought that up with it because it's universally kind of considered that Henry did, like, he had the nut run out, right, for like what Derrick Henry the player is, like, going to Baltimore, like. But it's funny that the other two kind of get pulled down. You brought up Taylor and Barkley running into like their dream scenarios, and it's funny, a lot of people like bring those two situations and they're like, oh well, Richardson's going to steal touchdowns, Hurts, the tush push is going to steal touchdowns. I mean, the Saquon one especially drives me a little crazy because, so remember when CMC got traded 2 years ago in season, and a lot of people this existed. A lot of people had the take that it was bad for Christian McCaffrey to go to the
because of Lance
49ers. No, at that time Lance was dead.
Okay, I was going to say Lance.
Remember,
I think Lance was over by then.
It was he can't get as many touches that he had in Carolina, and Kyle Shanahan doesn't throw to running backs.
Oh God,
Kyle Shanahan, a guy who literally has turned water into wine at running back his entire career, went out and said, "Get me Christian McCaffrey."
Yeah,
like dude that just made Alfred Morris a thing, right? Or like Elijah Mitchell just the previous season a thing. Is like, get me Christian McCaffrey. Howie Roseman has kind of done the same thing with the Eagles. Like, they had invested in running backs, they kept running into production. He said, you know what? I'm going to get Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley's available. I'm going to add him to this team. That's one. It's already a sign. The same thing with CMC, that like, hey, the offense is probably going to be a little different than what you think it's going to be because they're adding Christian McCaffrey. Same thing with the Eagles. It's probably going to be a little bit different because they're adding Saquon Barkley. And Saquon Barkley is coming from the New York Giants. Like, this is a team that was, every year that he's been in the NFL, he's the best player he played with was Odell Beckham as a rookie. Obviously he was good that year, but the Giants have been 30 or worse in offensive scoring 3 times over his 6 years, right? The highest they've ever finished is 15th in points per game as an offense. He's just going to a better situation, better offensive line, higher scoring team. And then also, if the Eagles are going to be good and Saquon Barkley is at least a shell of what people believe he's a player, or what Howie Roseman bought, DeAndre Swift, weeks 2 through 12, because remember they started Kenneth Gainwell week 1, and then he got hurt. Weeks 2 through 12, while the Eagles were on their win streak before they had that 1-7 collapse, and everyone died on their team, including AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts a little bit.
Weird.
DeAndre Swift was the RB5 in expected points per game, and in the RB5 in PPR points per game. Like, we can't act like just a running back can't produce there. If the Eagles are scoring points, Saquon Barkley's going to score fantasy.
You know how many red zone carries and red zone touches Barkley's going to get? Plenty.
Yeah. Not from the 1 yard line, probably, but from the 2, from the 2, from the 3,
from the 3. Like, this is why I love. So I have to know my audience, right? Like, I know you and we like bell cows. And we're going to see the glass half full with guys like Barkley, guys like Henry. Absolutely. I mean, they brought in Henry so they wouldn't have to run Lamar. That's why he's there. You don't bring in Henry and then not give him the ball inside the 5 yard line. Okay, so he's going to have more red zone carries than Barkley. Fine. And then Barkley's going to make up for it with targets, and it's going to be great. Both are going to get there. Fine. But when I go on with Best Ball Bros, I'm not going to, there's no fucking way we're even entertaining this notion of, running back starts. Not happening. Right. We can just have the intellectual conversation. And then if it's PPR, we opt out of it. Really, and I'm like, okay, we're going to, cooler heads will prevail. We will go London just based on the build. We have to do it. It's what the math says we have to do. But from a sex standpoint, it would be nicer if we could get to guys that they're just letting us have these elite running backs. It's tempting. It really is. That's why in half PPR, I say, you know what, you can, just let the temptation overwhelm you and go ahead.
Yeah, if you're starting 2 wide receiver spots and you're in half PPR, I don't think it's outlandish to potentially go that type of route. And one of the other things that's different this year is because running backs in totality are getting pushed down outside of the 3 that have been identified. These are the archetype of the guys. We have CMC and then potentially the 2 new CMCs. And then there's like a little bit of a gap. But this year we've got kind of like this pocket of old running backs. I say old again.
I mean, Saquon's 27.
Well, even older, like that Saquon is still regarded as like a first round pick or close to a first round pick, or at least an RB1. But what about these guys that have like this RB2 plus ADP. Derrick Henry, you can include in there. We got guys like Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, James Conner, Aaron Jones. In years past, these guys would be like 3rd round picks in
Yes,
fantasy.
you're right.
But now they're in a lot of leagues, they're going 4th, 5th round. So you can almost do like an inverse anchor build where you start wide receiver, and a 300 touch running back, which you never used to be able to do. And James Conner asterisk because he'll pace for 300 touches, but he'll miss three games.
Well, what you're saying is if you're in a Kentucky Derby format or you have the ability to get out of the 12 spot, if you're in a PPR league and you don't think you're going to get an AJ Brown or a Garrett Wilson, try to figure out a way to get a higher pick. I mean, it really does. Like you had that 14th, you had the 14th pick. You know what I would do if Drake London wasn't there in a PPR league? I would go Malik Nabers. That's what I would do. If you really want to know what I would do,
aggressive.
If the stakes were raised and I had to make a pick at the 14-15 turn in a PPR league, I would go Malik Nabers. And I believe in our league in the Kings Classic, Malik Nabers went a pick before that at the 113.
Oh, he did go 13. He did actually. Because I remember,
I remember exactly because I know exactly where Nabers always goes because I always get him in that one league. I was like, well, if you're going to do that, okay.
Yeah, because I went Saquon Olave in 14, pick 14 out of 14 teams.
Yeah, that's exactly that's what you would do. That is what you would do.
And I didn't have that spiel to justify the Saquon pick. It was just, again, that firewall. I would have loved in that format to start wide receiver, but we were already into, like you just said, Nabers was gone. Nabers was already gone. So, I felt like forcing the issue if I was going to go wide receiver, which maybe is the play, but I just took who I believed is the better player at the position. So you already hinted Nabers. You want to get him. If you had to take a non-rookie wide receiver that wasn't Marv or Malik Nabers to potentially have the most points this season, who are you taking?
Can we get back to that in a moment?
What's that? Yeah, what do you want to interject
because
with?
You mentioned a running back that is one of the players that has the most befuddling ADP to me.
Is it Kamara?
No, it's Aaron Jones.
Oh, yeah. In PPR, Kamara's ADP makes no sense to me. At half point, fine, but like the fact that Alvin Kamara is going like RB17 in PPR is weird.
Yeah, but you know who's going RB18? Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is on a team that is going to have to play fast, is going to have to throw a lot, and he is one of the best pass catchers, one of the most efficient receivers in the league. He's one of only, he might be the only running back on PlayerProfiler.com comparable to Christian McCaffrey. And anyone that's watched him play is like, yeah, he looks like Christian McCaffrey out there. Like his skill set matches. They have the same height, same weight. He's actually a little bit heavier. Very, very similar skill sets. And if ever used like that, he would produce at a similar level. He's phenomenal in all phases. He's going to a team with Ty Chandler, basically a one-dimensional slasher behind him, nothing behind him. He's 29 years old, same as Derrick Henry, and he's he's on the older side, but he's a lightly used race car throughout his career. And to me, this is a gift. I'm like, this isn't a standard issue 29-year-old Frank Gore. No, this is the year to get Aaron Jones. He was a second-round pick year in, year out in fantasy football in a situation where he knew going in he wasn't going to get all the touches. Now, for the first time, you have a division rival. Same thing with Barkley. You had a division rival stepping up and paying that extra to get this guy. I mean, don't overthink this one, man.
Yeah, I like both of those. I mean, I like Aaron Jones in full PPR. Like I said, I like Kamara in full PPR just because we've got like a little bit of a Konami code going, a cheat code for running backs.
Yes.
I mean, running back targets 6 years in a row. Everyone that listens to this show has heard the stat. It's running back targets have dropped 6 years in a row. Eventually, it won't go to zero, though it's not going to die. But these guys that catch 60 passes, especially in full PPR, like their floor is 30, their upside's really good, especially when these guys like bottom out that lean on touchdowns, right? Like if Achane only scores 6 touchdowns, like you get a situation where like, oh, Kamara looks very similar to him now in full PPR. And Aaron Jones could look very similar if you have equal touchdown runouts for those players. So yeah, those guys. And what, like I said, the inverse thing is that used to never happen is you never would be able to get those guys with 3 good wide receivers, or like they just didn't exist. And this year they do in a lot of leagues. And I just think there's a little bit of changing the guard. There's like a lot of old principles in fantasy football that I think we can challenge this year. One, I think, is like the age apex of running backs because of the way the market is. The players changing teams. I always tell people too, like usually good players don't change teams. And like the last couple of years, we've had like a little bit of a change where like trades and some just contractual stuff kind of fall apart, where like some good players have changed teams. But like a lot of times when people are like, oh, look at everyone falls off and they change teams, it's because bad players change teams. Like a lot of bad players change teams in the first place, especially through free agency. But this running back situation this offseason is, I think, more unique to the landscape. And I don't want to just box myself in and say, I'm not taking this guy because he changed teams. Like this is a proven good football player. And if the situation lines up and if someone wants to give me a discount, I'm gonna take that. But
look at Barry Noyce in the chat. He says Aaron Jones is garbaggio. Okay. So he doesn't use playerprofiler.com. He clearly doesn't listen to the people at Sharp Football. It's the reason why these services exist is because there is a stat called yards per route run. And it is one of the best indicators of how dusty a satellite back plus running back is. And we can draft McCaffrey with confidence because he's top 10 in that stat still. Aaron Jones ranked number 2 in the league last year in that stat. He is not any different.
Well, if anyone just watched the last 5 weeks of football, Aaron Jones was the best running back in the NFL, Christian McCaffrey included.
There's no
they played a playoff game against each other, and Christian McCaffrey had a nice touchdown run in that game, but Aaron Jones was the best running back in that game.
Yeah. He's 29. Well, McCaffrey's 28. And he doesn't. And last time I checked, Aaron Jones doesn't have a calf injury in preseason. So what are we talking about? Like, no, I disagree. I couldn't disagree more. It is a evidence-free position that you believe because player X is 29 years old, he's bad. Okay, well, that's where we can mine value. And when you're looking at a roster, does Aaron Jones have sex appeal? Does Kamara have sex appeal at this point in their career? When you're looking at your roster, no. Are these guys going to win people championships? Yes.
But it's not in the context of where you would have to draft those guys in previous years. I mean, you would have to take Kamara in the 3rd, right? And you don't have to do that. You don't have to take Aaron Jones 3rd. Sometimes you get him in the 5th, 6th round. Shit, you're an underdog.
Okay, FFPC right now, Aaron Jones. You want to know I mean, don't even ask me what underdog. Underdog is just like,
well, that's just a different game.
Yeah, that's a different game. He's going in the 7th round. He's going first pick in the 6th round in high stakes leagues that only start 2 receivers. Let that sink in. That when I talk about
and
value,
full PPR
and guess what? He's also up, and it's full PPR, and he's a satellite back, but who's going to be played like McCaffrey this year. He's also up in the last week, just so everybody, just so you know, half a round. So now that the volume's starting to go up and all the money's starting to come into these high stakes leagues, who are they drafting? Aaron Jones. That's what these guys are.
I mean,
that's what we do.
You can start a wide receiver heavy draft and get one of these guys in full PPR.
Yes.
You can get, I mean, this never existed. This just has never existed in my years of playing fantasy football, like these types of guys. And it's just the way the market has moved this year. So yeah, pretty interesting.
You and I are like, there was an HBO special, I believe, where Nick Saban and Bill Belichick would get together and talk.
I'm definitely not putting myself in the fantasy football equivalent as Bill Belichick or Nick Saban.
No, what they would talk about is, hey, the NFL is trending in this direction, and it can't trend in this direction forever.
Correct.
The NFL is going small ball. So they had this. This was one of the best conversations I've seen in the history.
I know what you're talking about, though.
Television.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not saying we're Belichick and Saban. We are crusty in terms of age comps for fantasy analysts. Then that's a good comp for us, just in terms of where we sit in the crusty hierarchy. Yeah, that's pretty much right. But the point is, they talked about how the NFL has gone into this extreme, and they actually called the peak of like dime defense in the NFL and said that there's no way this can be sustainable. We're going to go to jumbo packages and we're going to punish teams that keep doing this, because there's all the beauty of the NFL as a beautiful game is the constant balancing act of forces where, okay, something trends in one direction, you better not get used to it because it's going to trend back in the other direction.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that if you look at just the past 2 years where scoring league wide has been supremely suppressed. Look at the teams that are still having offensive success, and it's the McVay Shanahan coaching tree. I've talked about this literally all season too. It is because one, the McVay scheme has real impact because they come out in 11 and they force you into sub package, and they run out of 11. They're like, we have a run scheme where it's effective with 3 wide receivers. The Shanahan run schemes, and we're going to mix in a fullback, but they also will throw effectively out of heavier sets because then you have to adjust personnel based on what the offensive personnel is, and they're able to throw in those sets. It's why those guys have the high YPA stuff, and it's why guys like Stefanski can coax out a high YPA out of guys like Joe Flacco, and so
And it's why the Juwan Jennings have the snap shares they have.
Yeah, exactly. So
because there
is like a lot in motion here. But I've always told people too, like if you want to just like a cheat code, if you don't think the NFL like fully adjusts yet, you can still just pick guys off of these coaching trees. There's 13 teams. Then if you want to add, Andy Reid and Ben Johnson as part of that, like you have half the league that is doing the right thing still to into this current defensive meta, and you can just basically draft the crux of your fantasy team off of those teams.
Do you put Brian Daboll in that?
I don't, but I have no problem. I believe in Daboll. I think that the Giants had the 2 polarized seasons. They overachieved in 2022 to a degree where everyone knew that they were going to come back, but then it's now the underachievement we expected was so bad that it's like priced too low. So like it hasn't balanced out. So I think that there's definitely some upside with potentially the Giants being a functional offense. Obviously, I'd only for fantasy is like basically Nabers and Devin Singletary if like you have the right kind of build. But it's Nabers. And his ADP reflects it. So we talked about it a little bit. Nabers, Marv, but if you can't pick Nabers or Marv, who's Kelley? Wide receiver 3 rookie.
I don't understand Marv over Nabers in ADP.
Well, just the degree. I think the gap. I have no problem with it being ahead of him because he's got a better. It's easier to say like, all right, Kyler's not getting benched. Like, there's still a situation, an iteration of the season where Daniel Jones gets benched or is just trash, and Drew Lock is playing. Like, those all still exist.
I guess.
The team probably could score a touchdown fewer per game. Then all these still exist in the range of outcomes. So I get why it's priced that way, but I think the gap is too wide. I get Nabers way more than Marv because the gap between the two is just more palatable.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's great. I just purely on what I want is target share, and what Nabers is good at. It aligns with what Jones is good at. I don't think Jones is going to get benched because I think he finally has a weapon that complements him. And if there was a healthy Darren Waller or some other weapon, then okay, then we can talk. But I mean, there's McBride and Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch and running backs out of the backfield commanding targets in Arizona. There's no one other than Wan'Dale Robinson commanding targets at all in the Giants offense. So, I mean, it's going to be such a healthy dose of Nabers. And we're going to look up and we're just going to be slapping our foreheads. We're going to get like 5 targets from Marvin Harrison for 40 yards. And we're going to be like, eh. And then we're going to look up and it's going to be 11, 12 targets for Nabers. And everyone's going to be like, oh, right. See, they were even in terms of prospect profiles. That's the other thing. I also prefer Nabers as a prospect because he provided us with a lot more information on 2 guys that were pretty much on par. One guy worked out, the other guy didn't. Okay, easy choice. I'll take the guy.
I think on the field he provided more information too, just because of the how versatile he was. We talked about.
Yes.
You look at the way the wide receiver 1 in fantasy is now. That's another thing that's changed through our tenure of playing fantasy football. It's like it's no longer the traditional X wide receiver as like the dude you want. You want the guy that moves around the formation. You want the guy that's going to get these free snaps in the slot, right? Get these roster smoothing,
queen chess piece,
smoothing points. Yeah, and that's what Nabers did at LSU. He was that guy. He can still run slot fades and get vertical, but like he also is getting a lot of those free square targets. And 2 years ago, people were picking up Isaiah Hodgins, right? Like, and playing him. So like Marvin, like Malik Nabers is gonna, I believe, be fine in this system.
Top 5 in targets this year.
Yeah,
he's gonna be top 5 in targets.
Yeah. So I mean, all that makes sense, but you can't pick Nabers. Marv's gone. You got to finally ask the question. I've been dancing around the bush here. Who's the next wide receiver that you think scores the most fantasy points?
Oh, Jesus Christ. I'll take. All right. It's Deebo Samuel.
No, it's got to be a rookie.
Oh, we're back to that question. Sorry. I thought we were oh.
Throw the show sheet out. We're just riffing.
Oh, okay. Okay. God, I'm such a show sheet fanatic. Right? Show sheet file. It's Lad McConkey. That's the answer.
Is he just like the stamp of this year's Puka, or just the? I pitched a Pat Crane and Eric Bime for the last week. Like, what if we're wrong about the Chargers in general? Like, what if? And we know they are going to run the football, but what if you pair this running back room and the fact that Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh, every stop they've made in the NFL, have not had a good passing quarterback, that they just throw the football more than anyone's pricing in because of the previous iterations of Harbaugh and Greg Roman. Now, granted, they're not gonna have 650 pass attempts probably,
right?
But like, what if it's just they're not bottom third, like everyone is kind of pricing in for the Chargers in general? Because, I mean, well, Roman's quarterbacks, I mean, Lamar Jackson's the best quarterback Roman's had, and as a passer, we can still poke holes that he's not nearly as good as a thrower of the football as Justin Herbert, like traditional drop back game. And then he's had guys like Tyrod Taylor, right? At different stops. And then Harbaugh's had like a litany of like Colin Kaepernicks and Alex Smiths, in the NFL. So like Justin Herbert's like the first like fully functional passer, traditional passer either of these guys have had. What if they just are middle of the pack in pass attempts?
That's all he needs to be. That's all you need to be with Lad McConkey. Lad McConkey is the truth. Lad McConkey ran a 4.39. By the metrics, he's actually comparable to players like Percy Harvin, but he's actually a polished route runner. He's actually a professional wide receiver that is athletic. I don't want to, he's not Malik Nabers, but there is a world where we look up and it's like McConkey and Nabers are the guys that are commanding all the targets, and McConkey's actually outproducing Harrison. Like, that world exists. There's not any competition for targets. Quentin Johnston can't play. He's incompetent. The Chargers didn't invest anything. They have a 6th round pick and a bunch of min contract running backs. They can't they don't want it. They're going to run the ball because they have one of the best offensive lines in the sport. I mean, think about the tackle group they have. I mean, it's unbelievable. Herbert's going to have all day back there. And who's the guy that's going to be flashing open again? It's going to be Lad McConkey. And that he goes in high stakes right now at wide receiver 43. His floor, end of the 8th round, early 9th round, floor. He's even down half a round on underdog, on no news, on nothing. It's weird. It's weird. It's just a little bit of rookie polish, right? Is starting to a little
well, Herbert had the
dulling of the shimmer on the rookies is happening right now, because this is what happens as you get into the summer and into late August. But that just makes me want McConkey more, man. There's nothing not to like. I can't figure it out. Like, yes, he wasn't like the most productive player, but he only played 9 games, man. And the year before that, it was his sophomore year, he had a 16% target share. The guy's catching passes at like an 80% rate. He's also playing on special teams. So, I mean, which was one of the dead giveaways of Cooper Kupp back in the day, was like, oh, this guy's really good at football. He's like a, record-setting special teamer, as well as being a big target commander. This is Georgia. Like, some of these elite college offenses, you can't hold a lack of raw production against some of these players when there's just all these weapons and these coaches are doing weird stuff with their quarterbacks and their systems because they can, right? So I'm not holding what McConkey didn't do in terms of raw production against him. All he did was like improve his catch rate, improve his efficiency, his yards per reception every season. And then what did he not do? He didn't score touchdowns in college. He only had 2 touchdowns in his final year. Well, that's what we like. We like that the enthusiasm around a player can be a little bit muted because the touchdown rate was low. So It's all McConkey.
He had a little bit of that with Laporta last year with Iowa, who threw like 7 passing touchdowns.
Yeah, it's just don't blame him, man, because because Georgia's weird, right? They can be. They have all these stud players in all these positions. They have like you had a year with Georgia where Nick Chubb, DeAndre Swift, Todd Gurley were all on the roster. I mean, whatever, man. Like, don't worry about it. This kid's a stud. And then he goes and throughout the process, I mean, we're talking about like gold star, 10 out of 10 across all these scouting services. So I have learned that I'm not going to doubt guys like this. Right? I'm done doubting. I've
The
taken
White Angel of Death got you.
I've
It
taken
was
the White
one.
Angel of Death. Cooper Kupp came for me one night, and I've learned my lesson. Right? I've seen the future. Right? And I'm not gonna let it happen. Right? Scrooge McDuck's not gonna let this happen again.
All right, listen, we're pushing against here. I said I can't.
But you must be you're drafting McConkey, right? Come on.
Yeah, I mean a little bit of McConkey, Xavier Worthy. I think was a palatable answer too for there. I would
Well,
accept
Rome
him.
is the best of all of these guys, and
Well, the best player,
the
but
contingent upside
yeah,
on Rome Odunze is incredible.
correct.
I mean,
But
incredible. How you're not drafting him. That's the other thing. We talked about, oh, where's my stopping point? Because I want to load up the back of my roster with running backs at the end of drafts, always and forever in standard managed leagues. Great. And I'll pretty much stop at like a Khalil Shakir, maybe, or in that McConkey to Shakir zone. But if you're gonna draft a receiver to put on your bench, his name needs to be Rome Odunze.
all right, listen, I've got to get you out of here because we can't do the whole thing of like 3 hours on your show.
You saw
Unfortunately,
what I was trying to do, right?
I know, I know, I
I was
know.
trying to suck you in.
I know. Listen. I would sit and talk to you all day if I could, but unfortunately, we can't do it. But I do want to make sure before I push you out the door here that we do talk about fast draft a little bit. It's the reason why you went to Canton. It's to get your shirt on. It's the whole reason. So let everyone know that haven't found fast draft yet. Let them know where they can find it. What you're pushing out here. I know Billy had a big, Billy I haven't seen in a couple of years, but Billy had a big hand in the played a big hand in the what's gone on behind the scenes with fast draft as well. So give Billy his flowers too. But let everyone know what's going on with fast draft.
Well, Billy Muzio, if you're not familiar with Billy Muzio, he's one of the best fantasy rankers out there, and he's also a high stakes player, and he's worked at a couple of these content places, and he and I have joined forces. He's a real alpha in the business, and he's been integral to everything we're doing, and so he has a real amazing intuition about what fantasy gamers want, need, etc. So we couldn't have done it without him. And essentially, fastdraft.app is the website. Fastdraft.app is the website. And there are places, FFPC Underdog, they do an incredible job of providing a best ball platform where you and I can leverage our intellectual capabilities to maximize stack equity, correlation, understand nuances of week 17 and things of that nature. And these platforms do an incredible job of rewarding people that understand a lot of what we talked about today, which is team building and team structure. Okay. What was missing in the industry was just player takes, was just, we like Lad McConkey and we want to draft him and make money. So how do we do that? Right. So how you do that on Fast Draft is we just say, hey, draft 6 players, all flex, no stacking, just draft your 6, draft Nabers, draft your guys, right? The beauty of Fast Draft is, guess what? You can start JT Saquon with no ramifications, no opportunity cost ramifications. You can go JT Saquon and love life. In fact, there's plenty of actual JT Saquon rosters in Fast Draft right now, right? I've seen them. They look beautiful. They're gorgeous, right? So because there's not like, oh, I need to fill my wide receiver position. No, you can draft 6 running backs. You draft 6 guys every week. Your top 4 enter your lineup, and you can just draft the players you are most bullish on over ADP, and you don't have to necessarily have to game theory out the roster building like you do in other platforms. Because again, we're not going to out underdog or out FFPC. This is a completely different way of rewarding fantasy analysis and research, which is just basically like, hey, is this guy going to outperform expectations or not? And we're going to call it a day. However, the one aspect where the strategy really kicks in is in that 5th and 6th round of fast draft. You need to look at the tournament ownership. You need to look at the rostership for that tournament. And we show it in the draft room. So
Oh,
when
nice.
you get to round 6 and it's pick 55 and you have the option of picking, Deontay Johnson, who has like a 90% rostered rate, or Ladd McConkey, who has like a 7% rostered rate, what are you going to do? You're going to go McConkey so you can get unique, right? That's one of so there's some elements of DFS that come into play in this particular format. So basically what we did was we took some of the best elements of best ball that people love, some of the best elements of DFS that people love, and we created this season-long game, and there's going to be weekly games during the season. But yeah, we launched it at the Canton FF Expo. We already have close to 1,000 users. Drafts are ripping off like crazy. Most of these drafts, they take about 5 minutes. So for me, I always wanted to, if I'm waiting for my pasta to cook, I'm waiting in line at my kid's school to pick them up, whatever it is, rip a draft off and not feel like I need to really like lock in for an hour. I think a lot of people have always wanted to be able to do that, and that's what this platform is all about. So if you go to fastdraft.app, if you download it, send an email to fastdraftapp@gmail.com, fastdraftapp@gmail.com, and just type in the subject line Reebs or Reebs Rules with a Z. If you type in Reebs Rules with a Z, I will triple your deposit bonus. If you just type in Reebs, if you want to be lazy, I'll double your deposit up to like whatever, $250. But if you type in Reebs Rules with a Z, I will triple your deposit. That's because that's strictly for Sharp football fans, listeners, members of your audience.
There you
Just
go.
to check it out, get on Flex 4. And there's another tournament on there that's all rookie. That you can draft quarterback. So you could stack. There are Daniels McCaffrey stack people that are very happy that have been drafting on Origins. Yeah, this is the new thing. There's always going to be a new thing. And there's some fallow period in the dynasty and just overall fantasy football innovation space. Not a lot going on, right? There's a lot of pick'em games coming out the last few years.
A lot of them.
A lot. So what I said, okay. So Billy and I sat down and we said, okay, I guess we have to do this. We'll be it. We'll be what's next, I guess. It's been a lot of work, but it's now that it's out there in the wild and we're getting the feedback from people that love it. It's like, honestly, chills, man. Chills.
I love it, man. So there you hear it, man. Definitely take advantage of that promo code. Do use the Z if you're going to use rules, though. Absolutely.
You have to. Yeah, if you use an S, it's only double your deposit.
Beautiful. I love to see it, man. It was great to run into you. I know that we had another hour and a half we could have done for sure.
For sure.
If time allowed it.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe I'll come back and I'll get invited back to the mansion and we'll do it again. It's always like to frequent the mansion whenever I can.
Well, that's the thing. Everybody in the chat, everyone listening right now, when Nabers hits hard, right? When he hits,
I've been above market on Nabers.
I know you have. We talked about this. Absolutely. When it hits, it's like in our veins, man. It's gonna be in our veins. It's gonna be beautiful, right? When Saquon is exceeding expectation, when Saquon's outscoring McCaffrey, we're just gonna be like, it's gonna be in our veins, dude.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So listen, it was great to have you on the show. It's great to flip the roles and let you just kind of, do your thing while you usually let me do my thing. So that's awesome. Everyone check out Fast Draft. And remember to go to sharpfootballanalysis.com. You can still use promo code GetSharp to get 50% off of the draft kit these final 2 weeks and the 2024 football preview book by Warren Sharp. Definitely check that out. For Matt, I'm Rich. Good luck drafting this weekend.